Welcome back to Casuals Corner. You're joined by myself, Will, and today I've got the pleasure of breaking down a very exciting trilogy fight we have on our hands this Saturday. The first pay-per-view of the year, and what an absolute treat it is. Moreno versus Figueiredo. So let's not mess about. Let's jump straight into it and see how these two break down. In the first fight, we saw an absolute war, which had a little taste of everything. And due to the illegal strikes and a point deduction, of course, we know that it ended in a draw. The second fight, we saw a Brandon Moreno who arguably for the first time looked like he really deserved to be in there. And he had this confidence and this comfort within the octagon that I haven't really seen from him, or to that extent. And the fight played out with him pretty much dominating from start to finish and finishing Figueiredo with a rear naked choke. So now we have a trilogy and a chance for Figueiredo to reclaim his belt, and it's a very fascinating matchup and one which has some really interesting caveats too, which I'll explain. I'll start off by saying the thing that concerns me about Figueiredo is his approach to the losses. We saw fantastic sportsmanship after the second fight where you could see how happy he was for Moreno, and the fact that he knew on the night he was convincingly beaten by the better man. But then after the fight, this is what worried me. He proceeded to unleash a variety of excuses of why the fight didn't go his way. Now, I'm not saying they weren't true or they weren't valid, but we know he was opening the gym and the weight cut was difficult, etc. But the reason this worries me when I hear such things from fighters is because I think this: do they believe if they wouldn't have had those distractions or whatever it may be that they would have won? Have they assessed their loss properly? Have they accepted their loss properly? Have they accepted what they've done wrong in the fight? Or do they simply think if those variables were taken out like they are now, they would win? Now, this is concerning because, as I said, Moreno dismantled Figueiredo that night, nullified his attacks, looked sharp and dropped him with a jab, and the rest is history. Now, the interesting thing about this fight is we know Figgy has made changes to his camp and to his body. He's moved to fight ready for this camp, and he's been training with some of the greatest MMA athletes of all time in John Jones and Henry Cejudo, in a camp which is notoriously good at game planning and strategizing for opponents. So I would imagine coming into this one, he has a clearer game plan for success than he ever has done before. In the second fight, we saw some low kicks from Figgy, which I believe is a very good strategy against Moreno. As you can see, his stance is very heavy on that lead leg in a more traditional boxing setup, and this is definitely something he should look to invest in, especially with the knowledge of how durable and agile Moreno is. He can look to disable those assets early and put water in the basement, as the great Teddy Atlas says. Moreno is a sharp boxer and reads the game very, very well, so I would imagine that Cejudo has been working with him and not loading up his punches as much and telegraphing his shots as much, but rather using his footwork and his feints a little more to pull Moreno onto his big shots, because we know he is happy to trade and enter the pocket, so he could use that to his advantage. The main thing for me with Figueiredo's key to victory is the mindset he goes in there with. A lot of the times he's walked into that octagon in his career, he's blew away his opponent, and more times than not in spectacular fashion by knocking them out. Now, this is very possible. Figgy can do this at any time, but he needs to be fully prepared with that potentially not happening over 25 minutes. Because if he goes in there with a new strategy and a new game plan, and he's landed some of his clean, best shots which haven't got rid of Moreno, he will begin to get a little bit disheartened, a little bit discouraged. And as the fight goes on, and potentially then we could see him load up a little bit more and telegraph his punches a little bit more, which, like I said, then plays into the hands of Brandon Moreno. Figgy has to manage his output and understand it's a huge risk going for broke in the opening round or two, because as the fight goes on we can expect Moreno to pull away. But saying that, he holds tremendous power in both hands at that weight class, and he has aggressive jiu-jitsu, and we need to see some controlled aggression from Fig to take the win and really channel that God of War mentality that he has in the right moments and know when to pick your battles. On the other hand, we have the champion Brandon Moreno, who I was incredibly impressed with in his last fight. As I said, it seemed as if he had this new lease of life. He had this newfound image of himself as someone who had already gone in there with the scariest man in the division, who was steamrolling everyone at that point, and he held his own. And the second time, of course, he did more than hold his own, and he choked him out. He went away and made the necessary adjustments after that first fight and came in a real polished version of himself. His boxing was looking crisper than ever, his striking seemed more intentional, he had a real presence in the octagon, and the fight he dictated where it went down. Of course, it is easier said than done, but Moreno really needs to come in there and replicate the same performance. Yeah, I know, that's not great analysis, that's pretty obvious. But it's true. Applying smart pressure to Fig to not only get him guessing, but drawing out his big attacks early and making reads, and really using that 2-inch reach advantage that he has to keep him at range and discourage him by popping that jab in the face, which was so beautiful in the second fight. And we've seen how good Moreno's jab is and how good his boxing is overall. Moreno really needs to be ready to know when to enter the fire and when not to. It looks like he has a very controlled manner with his attacks now, and when I say everything is intentional in there and has a purpose and a meaning, he isn't just throwing for throwing's sake. He's looking to draw out attacks, set up his next combination, or work his way into range whilst using that really classy footwork that he has by cutting off Figueiredo. Because the truth is, it is a very big octagon for those two small guys, so footwork is essential. Of course, we've seen Brandon's grappling credentials throughout his career, and he actually came into mixed martial arts as a grappler, and most noticeably in his last fight, of course. But I feel a good approach would be to look to weather the storm in the earlier rounds, but where Figgy is most dangerous, and then look to mix in some scrambles and some takedowns. He doesn't even necessarily need to get them or even attack in the scrambles or anything off of them per se, but just give Fig another look and look to lean on that gas tank. Yes, he has had a better weight cut than usual, but I still don't believe he's fighting at what his probably natural weight class is, and that is definitely something Brandon can look to exploit. So to conclude, Figgy possesses many ways to win this fight. He has explosive strength and jiu-jitsu, which could see him squeeze hard on a neck or an arm, and he has knockout power, which could see him knocking down Moreno to the floor. However, I feel that we've seen the incredible conditioning Moreno walks into that cage with, and I feel as if now he has that champion mentality and he's just taken it to another level. His striking looks sharper than ever. It seems he is taking less risks, and his confidence that now he is the man has just absolutely propelled his game. It really is a tough one to call, but I'm going to go for Moreno on this one, and that's still with a finish. I'm going to say the 4th round. I fancy him submitting Fig, which I know is a little bit of a bold statement to say he goes and does that again, but I can just see a scramble happening. I can see Figueiredo's gas tank being leaned on, a little bit depleted, reactions a little bit slower than at the start of the fight, and then Moreno catches him with potentially a Darce or maybe even a rear naked choke, a carbon copy of what we saw in the second fight. But if Figgy does tough it out and goes to a decision, I think we could even see the scorecards leaning in Mirando's favour of 4-1. But as always, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, so drop in the comments how you think this one's going to play out. And as always, enjoy the big fights this Saturday. Peace.